I've been using Antelope audio products for, I believe, 7 or 8 years. I remember first hearing from Marcel to tell me about the 10M clock. That was kind of a one-way ticket for me. There was no turning back. And I've been pretty devoted to that until the 10MX came out, and then that was a game changer as well, which I was not ready for or anticipating. And now I'm using all kinds of stuff. I'm using the Pure2 for my main conversion for my mixes. I have the Orion32 HD interfaces. I have 2 of them. For me, the decision to upgrade my interfaces that I use with Pro Tools from the HDX interfaces, which I always thought sounded great, to the Orion32 HDs that I have now was simply just hearing them. And I recommend that to everybody. You really have to hear this in a critical listening space that you are familiar with. It's the only way to tell. Listening to me say they sound better is not going to convince you. You have to try it yourself. That's what I did. I'm as skeptical as anybody. When I heard the difference, it was obvious. It was the feeling of like, I can't really live without this stuff. And to think that it's affecting every note that's recorded on everything I will do from that point on was a pretty seductive thought, and they became the new interfaces. I was producing a great band signed to Warner Brothers Records called Family of the Year, and we were 2.5 months into their new album when I got those interfaces, and we plugged them in one morning, and I printed a mix that I'd been working on the entire day previously through the HDX interfaces, which sounded great. We loved it. I printed the same mix through my console using the Orion interfaces, and we all heard the difference, and we all kind of realized we had to reprint all the mixes on the record through those interfaces. It was really, when you A/B this stuff, which is the best way to test it, it's really evident. It's not smoke and mirrors. It really sounds different, and you can switch in between. We just switched in between the 2 mixes on a playlist, listening to my prior interfaces and then the 32 HDs, and it was easy to pick the winner. It just sounds fantastic, and everything else to me sounds thinner. It sounds a little more brittle, a little bit harsher. A little more like there's a veil in front of it, and it feels like the veil is removed going through those interfaces. So that was a no-brainer for me and for everybody in the room. What my ears like most about the new Orion32 HD is the capturing of the music. You know, it's a crazy thing to mic things and have that come down a cable and then convert all of that glorious noise into zeros and ones. And when I was younger, I didn't really pay attention to that. I just thought whatever converter came with the gear that I had, whether, you know, it was an M box or whatever it was fine. But as you go further down the rabbit hole, and I'm a card-carrying member of the bottom of the rabbit hole, this stuff makes a massive difference, and it's a digital world, so the management of how that stuff becomes digital and then comes back through speakers as analog is hugely important. I got into such trouble on gear sluts when I started saying that the 10MX clock was the most important piece of gear in my studio, but I hold by that because it's all digital. You know, even if I'm recording on tape, you know, I have 2 tape machines in my control room here. It has to go back into Pro Tools, and I want it to. So the management of that and the quality of that, the aesthetics that go into the choices made of how a converter works, what it does and doesn't do, are hugely important. And it affects everything I do. It truly is the lens at which I'm looking at all of my work and which other people are going to see it as well. So the capturing of the quality of the kind of the musicality that I'm going for seems to jump out of the speakers in the most pleasing way possible for me with those interfaces. It's a result I wasn't getting with anything else that I've tried. What I love about what I perceive to be the Antelope sound, and this applies to the clocking, which of course no actual audio is being run through, you're managing zeros and ones, and the conversion, the sound of the music going through the converters is a very kind of vinyl-like, tape-like framing of the music. It just makes me really happy. I feel like there's more information, but I like how it's presented better. The top is very present, it's very there, but it's never kind of poking you in the ear. It's very musical sounding, and I know that's a big word, but that's how it hits. I'm a musician. You know, I started first and foremost, and still view myself as a musician, far more so than an engineer or a record producer or a songwriter. I'm a big music geek who at one point thought I was going to be a classical pianist. So I really listened to this stuff deeply. The bottom end is just glorious. The mid is really well balanced and not harsh at all. None of this stuff is harsh. It's welcoming. It feels like a hug. And it's hard to find gear that does that, especially digital gear. So once I started hearing that, you know, I couldn't imagine using anything else. I'm really a big fan of the FPGA FX that come for free with so many of these units. And the list keeps growing. The thing that first turned me on to them was the Lang EQ that Marcel made me listen to at an AES show about a year ago, I think. And I love the real Lang EQs. They're incredible. They do a thing that nothing else does. And I get that thing that I'm looking for from their modeling of a Lang EQ. And now the list is ridiculous. I mean, they have two of my all-time holy grail favorite compressors, the RCA BA6A and the old Universal Audio 176. And you know, behind me I have a real, from the mid-60s, a 175B Universal Audio. I know the sound of these things really well. And above it I have an RCA BA6B compressor. It's pretty much the same thing as a BA6A. I know these things, I use them almost every day, and I don't know how they're doing it, but these plugins sound phenomenal. You got to try them. You know, again, me raving about it's only going to move the needle so far in terms of your opinion of things. You have to hear them, and I highly recommend all of them. I love the SSL EQs. I love the 1176. There's all kinds of different versions of the SSL EQs. It's brilliant, and they keep coming out with new stuff all the time. It's a huge addition to what already for me is a thing that I couldn't live without, which was the units themselves. I gravitate the most to the following FPGA FX. I love the Lang EQ. I love the SSL EQs. I probably favorite the black one, and I would say and the brown one too. The SSL EQs, there's different colors. I love the BA6A compressor. I love the 176 compressor. There's some Neumann stuff that I really love. It's quite, I haven't actually explored all of them because there are so many. There's some very musical ears behind them. You know, a lot of this stuff is made by people that aren't recording music, and that applies to analog gear as well. And I can always tell the difference when someone has an ear for music in the gear, the way the gear sounds. And I consistently get that vibe from whether it's an FPGA effect, to the 10MX clock itself, to the conversion. But I would say those are my favorite effects. To me, the decision to go with Antelope products is a really easy one because I have really forensically compared them to other things that I had made by other companies, I would recommend you do the same. I think if you do this for a living and your work is being judged on the way things sound, and if that affects your livelihood and that affects your ability to get hired again in the future, you got to check it out. For me, out of all the companies that make this kind of stuff, unless you're talking about like, you know, Bob Ludwig, like unlimited budget, a piece of gear costs $50,000. I'm not talking about that, but like stuff in recording studios for record producers and songwriters, this stuff to me sounds better than any other company making comparable gear. So absolutely, I wholeheartedly recommend it. It's easy to recommend. And you have to hear it for yourself. You have to make the comparisons yourself. Listening to me say they're amazing is not going to make your mind up for you. You have to let your ears tell you. But if you're considering making a change or, you know, making a first-time purchase, do your research. I'd be very surprised if Antelope doesn't show up at the finish line. I not only made these presets to share with other users, I use them myself on the records I mix every day.